roll call has been taken. Is there anyone besides Kathy who would like to be added to the roll, supervisor? I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of January 7th. Second. Motion and a second to approve the minutes. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Is there any public comment? Hearing none, we will move on to the district attorney's office.
Thank you. I gave you an updated sheet from what was in the packet. No information changed, it's just I added some stuff on the bottom. I thought you might want to have some information about the treatment and diversion programs. So I'm not going to go through this in detail. A couple of things I want to touch on. And then if anyone has any questions, I'm more than happy to talk about this. So if you look at the top portion, we've got three columns, 2019, 2020, and 2021. One thing that's important to understand about the previous year's numbers is those are not updated. Those are the numbers we reported when we did our review in those years. So we thought it was important to keep the same numbers so that we're comparing apples to apples, where we are at this point in the process. For example, in 2019, if you look at those fatality cases, there were 9 cases that were under review or declined at the time we had reported. That number would now be 3. The other cases were charged. The 3 that weren't, there were 2 that we didn't prosecute because of lack of evidence. But then the third one actually got charged, but it was a conflict of interest case that was handled by a special prosecutor because we didn't charge it. We didn't look at that as something we didn't charge. So just so you're clear on those numbers from previous years, they are static as they were when we reported it at the time. They are not updated. So you can see though that we've had gratefully a reduction in fatality cases in the past year. Going on down, I just want to touch on a couple of them, a couple of different lines. The battery, threat to police, judge, and prosecutor, that's mostly threats to law enforcement, though there are some batteries. You can see that that's gone down significantly. I found that very interesting. I think one of the things that has gone on is some years ago when this law was changed to become a little bit more user-friendly and more effective in dealing with threats on the street to law enforcement, we also took up a very aggressive stance. I actually handle virtually all of these cases myself, and we generally don't charge them unless we want to see prison. The reduction, I think, is partly due to the fact that we made the point that this isn't going to be tolerated, and I think somebody's getting the message. But there's also a fact that we've gotten a little bit more sophisticated in how we view these cases, in terms of what actual proof is necessary to prove the case. And when you do a lot of prosecutions, you just get better at it. And so we've been able to also charge the very best cases, as opposed to some of the ones that probably should go in a different direction instead of a threat, maybe a resisting or obstructing. And so I think it's a positive trajectory. The other one I want to touch down, to go down a few more lines to child abuse. You can see there's this big spike in child abuse. I want to investigate that a little further, but anecdotally what I'm being told is it's not that there's been this big uptick, it's that there was a lot of delayed reports from 2020 when people were mostly at home, kids weren't always in school as much, because really a lot of these reports come from mandatory reports out of teachers. And so we're getting a lot of delayed reports is what I've been told. I haven't verified that, but that would be consistent. I did look at the 3-year average, and you would look at 8 of those types of cases on average, and I also don't know if that's statistically different, 14, 4 to 6, given the average is 8. But anecdotally, they're telling me it's a lot of delayed reports. And the other one I just want to touch on is bail jumping. Bail jumping, obviously, again, people go on bond, they don't comply with bond a lot, and we charge a lot of them. One of the things that I think is important to understand when you see the numbers is that these are not cases, they're charges. So if a person gets charged 3 times for bail jumping in a single case, that counts as 3 in this group. So it's not that we charged 579 bail jumping cases, we issued 579 bail jumping charges. And I actually want to investigate why that's up so much. It's 40–45% increase over the past 2 years, which is concerning. But at the same time, it could simply be that we're getting better at detecting the bail violations, and also that in a lot of bail jumping cases, when a person will violate their bail, they usually will violate their bail in more than one way. So a person who's on bond for drinking and driving is told you're not allowed to operate a motor vehicle without a driver's license, you're not to commit new crimes, and you're not to consume alcohol. And if they get arrested again for drunk driving, they've committed a new crime, they've been consuming alcohol, and they've operated a motor vehicle, presumably without a valid license because they're in suspension from the previous drunk driving. And so that's actually 3 bail jumpings for what is effectively a single act. In a lot of times, prosecutors will look at that and say, I'm just going to charge 1 bail jumping because that gets us enough. And it may very well be that the prosecutors are just, I know I am getting kind of fed up with these bail jumping violations, and just instead of issuing 1 and that, maybe we're issuing 2 or 3. So that's the overall statistics for our case filings. These are not all the cases that we filed for the year, or all the charges. Just took out a select group to give you a feel for what some of the more major or significant stuff is that we're dealing with, stuff that's of interest. Going down in terms of our performance metrics, we had 1,462 criminal cases reviewed. 327 of them were on jail, so that's instead of having the case come and referred to us from the DA, from the law enforcement agency for charging at some future date, they are on the jail list, and we have to basically make a charging decision, usually in about 2 hours from when we get the reports. And so 327 of those were jail files that are in that fashion. Total files open for the year, 1,922. They're not all criminal files. We do speeding tickets. We have what I refer to as prisoner does, where the prisoner writes to a judge complaining that there's a violation of some law within the prison, guards abusing me, or sometimes a guy right now is complaining about his typewriter. Those go to the judge sends it to us, and then we have to make a determination on whether it's going to be investigated or prosecuted. And so there's other things besides just criminal cases that those 1,922 cases represent. In terms of our review time, I'm pleased with where we're at. Our goal is always to review cases within 30 days to make a charging decision, have a charging decision within 30 days. That's pretty much a gold standard in the state, and we're meeting that. We actually are right on that for felonies, a little bit better than that for all cases, but our medians are at 14 days for both felonies and for all cases. And those are the cases that aren't jail files. That's the rest of those cases that come in as a referral. It gets assigned to a prosecutor, and then the prosecutor has to, when they have desk time, make a charging decision. And we want that charging decision to be made within the 30 days, and our average right now for felonies is 30 days. Our average is 26 for all cases, so a little bit better on misdemeanors. Active time is the time from the time we file the case till the time the case is closed. Again, we're meeting our goal. Our goal is 180 days or 6 months, and we're seeing for felonies 142-day average with 149-day median, and an 86-day average for all cases and 67-day median for all cases. We can't take all the credit for that. The judges do a real good job in keeping cases moving. One of the things that we do that other counties don't do is we always make sure that a case has a court date. And that just means that it's going to, even if it's just a telephone status with one of the judicial assistants, making sure that that case is not getting lost in the shuffle. When Bob and I got tapped to go and preside over Columbia County, when the DA departed there, and we came in as special prosecutors to manage the office in the interim, we ran a report one of the first days we were there, and what was it about? It was 3 pages of cases. 3 pages of cases that had no dates assigned. They were just unknown, and they get lost in the shuffle when we do that. And a lot of counties unfortunately operate like that. We do not, and the judges are very adamant about making sure that there's always a date for a case so that it's coming back, and at some point, it's getting set for trial.
I know that just tangentially that after the COVID stuff passed and Columbia County went back, they had over 600 unscheduled criminal cases.
Yeah. So I mean,
no scheduling.
And unfortunately, I think that's I won't say it's the norm in the state, but it's pretty common that they operate that way. We actually, one of our administrative assistants who's responsible for our data analysis, periodically, several times a year, runs a report to see are there any cases that are unscheduled or cases that have been pending for longer than 2 years, basically, is what we say. When we get to that level, I want to know if there's something wrong with that case. But any cases that don't have any dates scheduled, we're picking that up, making sure that if something falls through the cracks, we're actually got a system in place to stop that from happening. Then the last thing I wanted to just touch on, which is what I added, was the treatment and diversion. One of the things that we're really happy about is that Bob and I in the office, we have wanted to have a pre-charge diversion program for very low-level offenders, people that are engaged in non-violent, non-victim crimes. They're first-time offenders and low-level misdemeanors, mostly drug cases, mostly possession of marijuana, but some other things could be in there. To create a pre-charge diversion program to keep them out of the criminal justice system for people that meet that criteria. And we have gotten that off the ground now. The individuals, they have to sign a statement admitting that they committed the offense to get into the program, so that if we end up, they fail, we can use that statement against them to basically close the case. They have to engage in an AODA assessment and do any follow-through that's required, and they got to stay out of trouble for 6 months. And if they are successful and the case doesn't get prosecuted, they have to pay a monitoring fee of $165 that goes to the county. We've had our first people go through the program. We have 8 that entered, 3 are currently in the program, 3 have successfully completed, 2 were terminated, but one of those didn't successfully complete because he passed away during the program, so I don't really consider that a failure. And so we're really happy that we were able to get that off the ground. And it's for extremely narrow group of non-violent, non-victim related crimes. And then on the bottom, we have the treatment court programs that the county is supporting. The TAP program, that is for people that are high need, usually have a lot of addiction problems, but they have lower medium risk, meaning they don't have much of a criminal record. That's what the TAP program is. We have 5 people that during 2021 entered that program. Then there's the drug treatment court, which is for high-risk, high-need people, again, high levels of addiction, but they have been a more serious offender. People that go into that program, they don't get out of their convictions, they're convicted, and it's just a question of what's the sentence going to be, and if they successfully complete the program, they get a more favorable outcome. If they are terminated from the program, we're generally recommending prison for those individuals. But they are convicted, they don't get out of their convictions, they just get this very intensive treatment that actually takes typically more than a year. They're actually 2-year agreements, and they usually are about 18 months. Yeah, about 18 months to get through the intensive treatment that's delivered through the human services here in Dodge County. And then we have the impaired driving court. This is for 34th offense drunk drivers. And we had 24 people that go into that court again. They don't get out of their convictions, they're convicted. It's just a question of what your sentence is gonna be. And if you engage in this really intensive treatment, and are successful in the program, then they get a more favorable outcome at the end of it. And so, those are the programs that we have running. I really appreciate the county board's support in those programs. And I'm happy to answer any questions about your review.
I just have one, is there a reason why, excuse me, in the top section, drug delivery, 20 was so low compared to the surrounding years?
Well, 2020 was an odd year for everything. And, it can be a lot of reasons for that. One is it's hard to develop CIs in the middle of the pandemic. And we have to have confidential informants to be able to buy the drugs. I think there was probably a lot of strain that was put on law enforcement during that time, which may have caused some impediments. We don't, generally that's one area, drug delivery cases, that we don't have a lot of cases that we decline on. And we decline on cases when there's not enough evidence, when there might be reasons that are outside of the case for fairness that we don't think that this case should go forward. Drug delivery really isn't one of those cases, because when you have a drug delivery case, you generally have extremely good evidence. You have controlled buy operations, and they're on video, and so it's not that we're declining prosecution, we just weren't getting referrals. And so it's something more out there. Frankly, probably a lot of drug dealers, drug users just didn't leave their homes. And so there just was a lower instance of a lot of things during the pandemic. I think anecdotally there was a belief, and I think there was some truth to it statewide, that drunk driving plummeted when we were all in lockdown. Well, the bars were closed. People weren't out driving around, they were drinking at home. And so, there was a lot of things that went on during the pandemic in 2020 that really impacted how the criminal justice system operated. And so it's an anomaly. You can see we're 45 and 19, 46 and 21.
So it's sting operations more or less?
Yes.
Thank you, that's great.
Any other questions?
Kirk?
Yes.
Online, you've got like a policy, online there's a policy and procedure manual for both the drug treatment court and the impaired driving court. Is there a similar document for this TAP program?
TAP?
Well, you got TAP, right?
Those policy and procedure manuals are over for
Human
services. That would be a question for human services.
Okay.
Because what we do, all we do is we identify people that are appropriate for programs and not for traditional prosecution. And then we feed them into the program, and then human services is the one that delivers that treatment. We have a member on the team, Bob is on the team, our paralegal also participates in doing a lot of the funneling in, if you will. But that would be a question better for Becky Bell.
How do you measure success in these?
Again, that would be a question for human services.
Well, how about drug treatment and impaired driving?
Well, they have to complete the program, and if they complete the program, then that's a successful outcome for our purposes. We have a contract that we have with the drug treatment court individuals. It's a very long contract. It requires them to participate in whatever treatment is delivered to them by the human services program. They have to stay out of trouble. They have to pay back the buy money. They have to pay their monitoring fees. They have to participate and progress through the treatment program. If they successfully graduate the program, then that's a successful outcome for us. And that's very tailored to the individual, because every person that goes into that program has different treatment needs.
We do measure recidivism with it too, or not?
Yeah, but Bob probably is.
So, the state actually measures recidivism, and they have set up their own standards and measures. And quite frankly, the state has something called core reporting. That's supposed to keep track of that. In our opinion, they're not doing a very good job of it, and we don't think the numbers that they're giving back out to the counties are actually accurate. That's,
What's your opinion? I mean, the programs are good.
Yeah, I think,
Okay.
and it seems like we seem to have a lot less recidivism than what I've heard about in some other counties. I think our impaired driving court does an outstanding job. Very rarely have those guys come back with another OWI. Drug addiction's tough. You know,
What I can say anecdotally is, we've had people that, and I have no statistics on this, all I can say is people that I've been prosecuting for years and put them into the program, and I see absolutely changed lives. I had an individual that came into court this week. He had completed the program successfully in December, and I've been prosecuting him since I got here back in 2006, and really just had a mess of his life. And he was a heroin addict, and he came into court this last week, and he's fully employed. He's working at it's called Whiskers, the place that makes the automatic cat boxes here in town. He's on some special team there that he's a highly valued employee, and he reported to us that his work through AA or NA, whichever version of it that he was participating in, he's now progressed to the point where he's no longer just a participant, he's a sponsor. A year and a half ago, 2 years ago, this person, it was a terrible picture. He was basically on death's door, in my opinion, and I've been dealing with him for years. It was a different person that I was in court with, and returning people to being productive, tax-paying, contributing members, that they're actually giving back, being sponsors in AA, and trying to help other people. I can't tell you about the statistics of recidivism in relation to these programs, but what I can tell you is that I have seen absolutely changed lives with some of the folks that come on. We have had some spectacular failures too. We've had people that have tricked their way into the program and have stayed in the parking lot and sold drugs to the participants, and those people went to prison, and we dealt with them very harshly. And that's the difficulty in trying to determine how to put people in these programs is to try to determine who is committing crimes because they are a drug user and who is a criminal that happens to use drugs. And separating that out can be difficult. I think we're getting better at it. Our screening program is pretty good. The Human Services has a screening tool that they use. And the thing that's important to remember from my standpoint, as a public safety professional, is that this is not a get out of jail free card. It's not a get out of your conviction program. When these people come in, this individual who I had in court this week, he was coming in to be sentenced on delivery of controlled substances. He pled to 2 felony offenses. He was on probation with an imposed state prison sentence with one of them to go into the program, and then he was on the contract for the other charge. If he failed that contract, he was looking at 15 years in prison. We would walk in and we would say, this much prison. But he completed successfully, so he didn't go to prison, but he still retains that felony conviction. He still has to have that accountability. And so I think one of the things that we're dealing with, a lot of questions about criminal justice reform in the state right now. And I don't want to get on a soapbox, but bottom line is the Dodge County program, which is somewhat unique. In fact, we've been criticized for this by other counties who have maybe softer, friendlier programs, if you will, is that we're insisting that these people take their convictions and maintain their convictions. This is not a program of get out of your felony conviction. This is a program of, do you want to have treatment? Do you want to have a better life? Do you want to have health? Do you want to live? And if you accept the treatment, we'll give it to you, but you're still going to be held accountable. And so that's one of the things that's really different about our program. Sorry, what did you say?
The graduations, you should chat about that a little bit. Those are important.
Well, yeah, and there's a graduation ceremony when people complete. They come in, they give a speech. Bob probably he's been to a lot of them, and so I would actually probably have him describe some of the things that he's seen. I've attended a few of them.
people show up with their family members and extended family members, and there's applause and there's crying, and it's really very moving. And I think we have in the past invited this committee members to come to one, and you're certainly be happy to tell you the next time we're having a graduation. We get a lot of law enforcement, which is one of my favorite things is, you know, there are skeptics out there about, you know, why are we doing this? And I think that we've turned some people around by when they come to a graduation, they actually see the light. What it's like. Judge Shasha has participated in a number of these graduations. I don't know.
Well, my first reaction at graduation was either we have some really, really bright and talented people that are going through this process, or they are hiring some professional speechwriters. Because I couldn't believe that what they were saying was just absolutely knocked my socks right off. Now, question is, are they scamming us, or are they really, have they really made a change in their life? And that's where I think the long-term tracking, I think, is important. The way I view the program is that we are like a rowboat at the scene of the Titanic. Are we saving lives? Absolutely. Are we making a dent in the problem? That I don't know. And I think whether the state does it or whether somebody else does it, I do think that we need to do some long-term tracking. Because to run somebody through the program, if they're just drifting back in a year or two, I personally don't count that as a success. But, you know, you can create whatever success criteria you want. I would like to think that the taxpayers are achieving a lifelong change in somebody's life, rather than a 1 year, a 2 year, a 3 year period of semi-sobriety. But the graduation ceremonies are a very powerful experience, and I would encourage anyone who's interested in finding out what's going on to attend those ceremonies, because what some of those people say is very dramatic, very powerful.
If I could, I've had a couple of these graduates come up to me after these graduation ceremonies and say, you guys have changed my life, and gotten hugs and thank yous. And then I actually see them out in the community, and it's amazing, the change, because we know who these people are, and then we see them out in the community, and they are not high. They are not out there committing crimes. Seeing them before the program, and you could just see that everything about them was not good. And then you see them after the program, they are productive, they have a job, they're bragging about all the great things they're able to do. And it has been absolutely incredible, the success that we have seen since this has been started. And it's been a great team effort by so many different people around. We got a huge committee of people that put this together. It's work, but it's well worth it. And every single one of these that we can save is worth it.
Things that we all take for granted are really, really special to those people. We come home every day, we see our kids. One of the common threads that you hear at graduation is, I get to see my kids now. Because their life was in such disarray that they had supervised placement, or placement was cut off, or they didn't even know where their kids were, and now they have a relationship with their kids. You know, it's hard for us to appreciate how important those basic things are. But when you live the kind of lifestyle that they live, that stuff is off the table for them.
Any other questions? All right, then I'll move on. Just briefly, we have, I skipped the carry forward request. We have no carry forward request. Currently, these are just automatically being placed on, and we have none. And the staffing update, I just wanted to put that on because I want to keep the committee aware. And we're going to have a significant retirement this year. One of our most senior prosecutor is going to be retiring, traffic attorney who has been with this county, I think, going back to the early 90s. And that's going to be a significant impact. One of the things that I do want to tell you, though, is we have prospects already. One of the things I've told my neighbors and their DAs across the state is you better improve your program, because if you don't, I'm going to take your best people. And that's been kind of my mantra, and I've seen other counties start to do that they're improving their program, they're trying to cross-recruit. And we have had a very experienced prosecutor from another county come and visit recently. There's no offer on the table, there's no opening, but wants to work with us. And there are other attorneys. We had an attorney that my neighbor in Fond du Lac, Mr. Tony, called me and wanted a reference on this attorney because they were a local attorney, and I said, very good attorney, good talent, and make sure you get her trained real good so that when I take her from you, I don't have to do a lot of the training. And so we feel very good about our prospects for succession going forward. And on the other end of the staffing note, we have had some COVID people out for COVID. I'll tell you, I tested positive a week ago, and a week and a half ago. I'm past my period of time where I'm in COVID jail. But it wasn't debilitating for me, and I was able to work at home every day, and we never missed a beat. We had actually multiple of our attorneys since December have been out, having to be quarantined at home. The technology that we have developed and implemented in the office, the second mobile screens, our laptops, our VPNs, our paperless office system, it just continues to pay dividends. I spent last week, I even appeared at a hearing by Zoom and appeared in court from my home, and was able to draft cases, draft pleadings, do the normal management work. All I really need is a computer and a phone, and we were able to do that, and we haven't missed a beat despite that. And I think that's something that the county should be very proud of, that the support that the board has given us to develop these programs, this technology, these policies, just continues to pay dividends, and we're in great shape. So that's all I got.
Any questions for the DA? Thank you. Child support, Terra.
I have no carryforward requests.
Anybody want to question her on that? Clerk of Courts, Lynn.
I also have no carry forward requests.
Going a lot quicker. Circuit Courts, Judge. Medical Examiner.
I have no carry forward request, but we have one other item I need to. Okay, you should have received a memo in your packet. Can you hear me? You don't need it, you can hear me? All right, you should have received a memo that a couple of weeks ago, Dodge County was contacted by Green Lake County regarding the possibility of providing medical examiner services for Green Lake County. Last year, their coroner died while in office. No one has been appointed yet, and they are They do want to switch over to a medical examiner system and contract out with another county. They did contact us, we didn't contact them, to look at the possibility of filling that position, to contract those services out. We have had preliminary discussions. They were positive, and an outline of a service agreement was prepared, and you should have that attachment, and that was provided in the packet. And then it continues, if the Green Lake County Board of Supervisors abolishes the office of coroner and details of the service agreement can be reached, a resolution will be presented to JPP in March with possible consideration by the county board at the meeting on March 15th.
Any questions?
BJ, you have part-time people now, correct?
I do, I have 3 full-time and 2 on-call deputies.
So what's your status? You would take these on call and use them? Or your
It
full-time?
it would be a combination of just kind of like we do now. So we have a pool, that's the on-call people.
Yeah.
And then we have our full-time people. And between all of us, we cover all the shifts. So it would be a combination thereof. And of course, I respond to scenes, as does the chief deputy medical examiner. There are certain scenes that we definitely respond to. You know, those certain non-natural deaths where homicides, accidents, certain types of accidents, drug overdoses, where I always respond, or if I'm not, the chief deputy does.
I guess my question is more.
It'd be the same standards.
How many hours do you anticipate needing for Green Lake County?
I'm trying to calculate that right now. This was only presented a couple of weeks ago, so I'm trying to gather numbers. Green Lake County has they only do about 250 deaths annually. The majority of those are natural deaths, die at home, and a lot of those people die on hospice. When a person dies on hospice, we don't respond. There's a hospice nurse there who does the pronouncing. We can do that information because there's we can take that information over the phone because there's a medical professional there. You know, occasionally we do respond. I shouldn't say, we never respond, but occasionally we do. So a lot of that would be done, we could work remotely. Their rate of even motor vehicle crashes is a lot lower than ours. I ran some stats, and over the past 5 years, 6 years, they had like 5 total. So like 1 or 2 a year maybe.
If I'm not mistaken, their population is a lot less than ours.
Their population is about 19,000, and the size of the county is about 1/3 of ours, roughly.
And if I'm also understand things correctly, we're gonna put a pool together of Green Lake deputies, hopefully that will respond, so we don't have deputies or emergency response people sitting for hours at a scene.
That all has to be worked out.
But that's
That would be ideal, that would be ideal, but we may be responding as well, I don't know. Those are great questions, and I don't know the answers yet, this is all really preliminary. Those are great questions. That in 2 weeks, I don't know the answer to.
Any other questions?
If you have questions that you want me to answer, please let me know so that I can work on them.
I mean, mine are gonna center around the source of the labor force.
Yeah.
So, I mean, where's it gonna come from?
Ideally, it's
and
gonna
all
be,
that.
ideally, it's gonna be a combination of, there's gonna be some Dodge County time involved, and Green Lake's gonna have to pay for that time.
Well, but is it
And-
overtime then? I mean, I assume your
Oh.
staff is busy. If you're drawing upon your part-time pool, that's different, right? Because they have hours potentially available,
Right.
right?
Yeah. It will affect, well, I shouldn't say will, but it may, I'll have to figure out how we alter scheduling. And the on-call people, the pool people, they're paid on a per case basis, a per diem basis, which is how Green Lake is paid as well, so.
some questions to get answered in the next month or two.
Oh, yeah.
I would like to see, I think maybe the committee here, to make sure that it is not going to cost Dodge County anything to help out a neighboring county.
I agree 100%. Yep.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Sheriff's Office. Sheriff?
I'll start at the top of our list there. There is no update on contract at all. Staffing. We are currently 14 short in our jail. That includes one program specialist, or programs officer. So it's really 13 correctional officers, corporals that we're really short on in the jail. We did have a couple of those resignations, kind of partially rescinded their resignations here this last week and said they want to stick around part-time, which is a huge help. We'll have, I've got Lieutenant Beck here, he'll chat a little bit about some of those vacancies there. Throughout the rest of the office, I have one vacancy in patrol, which I've got introduced coming up here later this month. That's the, we were hoping to get that one filled right away in January, but the pool of the applicants that we had, we went through those and we didn't have enough certified, so we enough certified ones that we didn't have to send to the academy. So we hung on to a couple of those names for potential vacancies later in the year as a result of retirement that are anticipated. But we've opened a new process for hiring that one, and that was a newly created or recreated position as of January that we're working to fill there. Everywhere else is full. There are no other vacancies that I can think of outside of maybe a couple part-time positions that in the entire rest of the agency. Corrections is the only area which we are struggling. Any questions about those specifically before I get on to the next topic? As far as the resolution that you had, the draft resolution that you have in your packet, I want to give a little bit of a background of how this resolution came forward. Also in your packet, you have some information from Winnebago, Fond du Lac, and Columbia County, and some of the changes that they've made in their counties that have been pretty drastic as far as recruitment and retention of their employees. A couple weeks ago, actually, we can go back to October. In October, we had meetings with you, with HR committee regarding recruitment and retention. Both committees approved a $6,000 hiring bonus, and that has been successful. In fact, Dusty and I were talking earlier this week, and we had conversations with some of those employees that have been recruited, and not all of them came here because of the hiring bonus, but at least half of them said, if not a little more than half of them that we've hired over the last few months have said, yes, that was a significant factor in why we chose to come to Dodge County, considering the other ways surrounding us. There was also a plan presented by the administrator on retention, which was utilizing ARPA funds. That was presented in October, expressing some of our concern over retention of our employees if we give a sign-up bonus. That, I know that resolution was submitted, actually for all employees around the county, as part of the February 1st meeting you had and is under consideration. In fact, I wrote a letter for a different request, and in that request, the very first couple lines was referencing to that resolution for countywide retention. I think that's very important, given the status of everything in our country right now, that you strongly consider that resolution. In addition to that, a couple weeks ago, I spoke with the county administrator, and I expressed my concern that there feels like there is a lack of urgency for the correctional officer position. Because of what we are facing here, we are seeing a lot of, over the last year, as Tanya put it at the HR committee meeting, it was the great resignation across the country last year. And we had a number of retirements last year that were anticipated. We cost about the same amount, and we are not making progress. And some of those employees have left because of wages. Actually, most of them have left because of wages and schedule. Monday through Friday schedules are becoming available left and right out there, and people don't want to work nights and weekends. So I expressed to the county administrator, what can we do, because this is an urgent matter that we need to address. We talked about a number of different things. I asked if there was a potential that we could absorb something into our budget, and we had a discussion back and forth. He decided that it would be best to draft a resolution to bring forward for the potential of a budget adjustment should it be needed. I want to make it very clear that at no point was I ever advocating for ARPA dollars for that. However, the county administrator felt it best that that be where we begin the draft. I honestly have no preference of where those dollars come from. That's a decision of the board. Whether it's ARPA or it's from our budget or whatever it is, I just want to make it very clear that ARPA was not my request. That was a decision that the county administrator thought that might be a good place to start. As we move forward through this with the HR committee, we talked about this resolution, and we talked about some of the various challenges with that other potential request for funding for the entire county and so on and so forth. And they wanted us to come to you. We don't necessarily think the resolution might be the right way to go on this. We have some other options, which I'm going to let Scott explain here in a minute. We have some other options for you, which we believe that we can absorb into our budget as a result of the 14 budgeted positions that are not filled right now. And so that's kind of where we're at. What we'd like to do is, after he gives you a rundown of what those are, get your feedback and input on what you think would be appropriate, and then we can take it back to the HR committee, get concurrence between both committees and move forward. And then again, it would come out of the budgeted 2022 dollars out of the sheriff's office budget that are not going to be expended because there's vacancies. So before we get to Scott and the options, I just want Lieutenant Beck to go through a few of the things that he has noted.
Alright, so I'm just gonna go through some numbers here with you as far as our personnel update goes. So, dating back to July of 2021 to today, we've had 21 retirements or resignations. At that time, back around July, we had 5 to 6 openings. So, 5 to 6 openings, add in 21 retirements and resignations. We've only been able to hire 9 full-time staff since last May. So what I did is I just kind of pulled together some stats here and some facts from these exit interviews. Out of the 21, not everybody participated in these exit interviews. In fact, I got stats from 17 people here. So we had 5 individuals that left our agency to go to other public employers. Monday through Friday schedules, 3 of the 5 left us to go to Monday through Friday schedules. One of the employees left our jail to go to a neighboring jail for $5 an hour more. One of the employees left to go to public Monday through Friday. They had the same pay, better insurance. One of the employees noted they didn't want to work 12 hours shifts. So of the other ones, we have 12 of them that left to go to the private sector. And the common trend between them, people leaving in their exit interview comments, is Monday through Friday schedules are just more better for their family. They cite better pay, they cite better incentives such as performance bonuses, holiday bonuses, anniversary bonuses. Just this week we had an employee that informed us and changed his mind 2 times actually, informed us he's going to the private sector. You know, we came to him, said, what can we do to make you stay here? You're the future of our department. You just got named FTO. You're a bright dude. We like you a lot. And so basically what we told him is we were gonna change his hours for him. We were gonna put him on a power shift at 10 A to 10 P that helps the family dynamics. And so he went back to this future employer and said, hey, I'm gonna stay with Dodge County. They offered me something. And the private employer came back, gave him more incentives, and he says, okay, that's too good of a deal. I'm out of here. So we tried with him. So Just got a few more stats here for you. So since May of last year, we have had 181 people apply for the spots that we have open. So of those 181, 35 of them just basically started the application, never finished it, which seems to be a trend. Of those remaining applicants, 121 of them ended up being rejected in the hiring process, and that's due to them interviewing with us and failing the interview, making it to the psych exam, failing the psych exam, making it to the background, failing the background, or just people that would apply and I'd call them for interviews and they just never would call me back, or those that we'd give background packets to, they'd pass the interview, we'd give them a tour of our shiny, beautiful jail, and they just never would get back to me, so. So again, we currently have 14 openings, and as of Monday, I had not had a new applicant to interview since January 19th. So I just want that to kind of stick out to everyone. We have 14 openings, and as of January 19th, we did not have a new applicant to interview, fill those spots. Thankfully, just logging into talent acquisition this morning, the patrol captain managed to talk one of his patrol candidates into applying for the jail. Sounds like he explained to him, we're pretty much full here in patrol. The jail's looking for some people, and he thankfully applied there. So we'll go ahead and get him interviewed and go through the process with him. So that's pretty much the stats I have. You guys got any questions from stats or no?
How many does it take to staff the pod that's closed?
3
people?
Per shift.
Total. I mean, how many people would you need to hire in order to reopen that pod?
That's pretty complicated.
9
Yeah.
or 11?
You have,
Well,
It's complicated.
it's not in a black and white, this is how many people it's gonna take, because all of those people rotate throughout the different pods and there's different shifts, and that overlap, and so you can't just say it's gonna be this many. We're gonna have to evaluate once we get there, depending on how many people are trained and ready to go, before we can actually say, okay, yeah, we're ready. See how much overtime we would have to incur. I mean, there's a lot that goes into that rather than
There's
just needs
14 openings, right? So, I mean, if you hired 14 people magically tomorrow, you'd be able to open the pod.
Not
No.
tomorrow.
Well, I understand, at some point, right?
In about 3 or 4 months, yes, absolutely.
So I'm trying to understand, are you fully staffed then having this pod closed? Or are you still short?
Still short.
Still short. And how are you dealing with the shortfall?
Overtime,
Overtime.
moving people around.
Just overtime for the existing correctional officers or?
Jail admin's been filling in, some patrol deputies that have been corrections officers have been going over there helping out.
So even if you fill the 14 openings, you'd still be short? Is that how I understand it then?
No, we'd be full. We filled the 14 openings, we would be full. And we'd be able to open up. I would estimate if we were to fill 7 to 10 of those, we'd most likely be comfortable enough to be able to reopen H. Just an estimate. We'd have to evaluate, but if we had about 7 to 10, I think we probably could consider reopening H at that point.
How many would you have to lose before you'd have to close another pod?
That's a concern that Scott's going to touch on here a little bit. I don't foresee that we're going to have that many more leaving here shortly. I think
We hope it's stabilized.
we're at a pretty stable point now. But I think if we were to lose 3, 4 more, we'd have to strongly consider it.
I mean, you mentioned it Tuesday, that's why I'm wondering how many you would have to lose before we'd be forced to close another pod.
Yeah,
So it's 3 to 4.
I would guess that's an estimate. We'll have to evaluate if that were to happen, take a look at the schedules if that were to happen. But yeah, I think we're not that far off from it.
But there isn't a number that you can assign how many people you have to have in order to open the pod. If you need 14, is what you're saying, is what I understand.
No, that's not what I said.
So,
I said we probably could start considering it about 7 to 10.
okay. So what's that?
Before we get to Scott here, I also wanted to two that hired, that have the most employees, correctional officers, are Dodge and Waupun. Fox Lake has this, a fair amount, and Burke Center is not a whole lot, it's about 30 employees they've got there. But all maximum security prisons, which you can also consider us a maximum security jail, all maximum security prisons in the state are getting a $2 an hour bonus. All maximum security prisons that have a vacancy of 40% or more, which Waupun does, get a $5 an hour bump. And I confirmed that this last week with the Dodge secretary. So that brings both of their wages for both of those prisons up. One pretty close to where we're at, and the other one significantly above where we're at right now for starting wages. Scott?
All right, so before I get into, I gave you all a few handouts. Before I get into that, I want to just kind of, we were fortunate at this committee, you were able to hear our finance director take us through the jail analysis that he had done. I want to just reiterate a couple of the high points from that, because they really help us understand the lens we have to look at what's going on from my perspective. First one is that when he compared what happened when J-Pod closed, we had a reduction of variable expenses of $952,000, or about 10%. However, our federal border revenue decreased by $1,726,000, so it was about $774,000 deficit that we incurred because of that. And the high points that he talked about were specifically that it is very clear that us maximizing our bed space through boarding federal borders significantly reduces the tax burden or the tax levy for the sheriff's office, because we make so much more than with those extra beds. He also had on page 18 of that report, he had compared us to other counties and broke it down to a per capita tax levy based on our population. And if you recall, Dodge County was second from the bottom, with the second lowest per capita, which was $34.13 compared to Columbia, which was at the top at $84 and some cents, Fond du Lac at 61, and Jefferson at 56.87. So just keep that in mind as we talk about this. So then the sheet I handed out, that's, you have to hold this way, that doesn't have a caption on top. These were just some notes that I had put together for the HR committee earlier this week. It was basically taking a snapshot in time on that date and looking at a variety of things that impact us. The first one was the unused expenses, and it's basically like if that snapshot in time would stay static for going forward, this is what it would look like. Unfortunately, it's much more dynamic and constantly changing, but at least gives us something to go off of. Unused expenses based on the CO vacancies. At 14, the average wage and benefit that computed for all the COs was $64.22 per month. So that it would come out to $89,908 per month that you have that are unused expenses based on that. Adding in the overtime that we had posted for the month of February at that time, that came to $2,666. Odds are it'll be more than that because of short notice, sick calls and things like that. Then the lost revenue per month at that day, we were currently 39 below our budgeted number of 160 beds. If you recall from budget time, we budget that we would have an average of 160 contract beds throughout the year. On that date, we were at 39 below. That's a loss of 103,974 in revenue per month if that were static. And then we also currently, if you recall, we are housing some of our county inmates that we could in other counties. Again, at that time, it was 21 inmates per day at about 46. It varies from depending which county it's with, but that came out to 29,946. So that I looked at that as a monthly surplus or deficit from our budget of about 46,678. We talked briefly about that. If we lose a handful more county or COs, we're going to seriously have to look at closing a pod. That would result in approximately 50 more beds take that 46,000 from above and just extrapolate that out for the last 10 months of the year, if it was static, it won't be, but that would be 466,780, which is even more than what the incentive bonus would be. If you add the two top numbers that I have highlighted for the monthly deficit, as well as if we would have to close another pod, you can see very quickly how that would result in potentially up close to a $1.8 million shortfall in revenues. Now that was a quick overview that I was able to throw together, because obviously there would be a little bit of savings elsewhere. But again, as we learned from the closure of J-Pod, we lose a lot more revenue than we save in expenses. So then I'd ask you to take out the other document, or the one that says jail bonus option. So speaking with the sheriff, he wanted to have several options to throw before you so you can decide which direction you want to go with this. Option one would be what I believe you had it in your packet, the analysis that the finance director did for the resolution, that as far as how he came up with the $321,556. That would be for the 4 quarters of the $1,000 bonus, as well as the $2 per hour for all weekend hours worked for the entire rest of the year, with a start date of March 5th as an estimate. We broke that down. Then option 2 would be doing the quarterly bonus for the first 2 quarters, but the 2-hour weekend hour bonus all the way through the rest of the year. The total for that would be $189,142. Option 3 would be the quarterly bonus just for the first quarter, but then the 2-hour weekend bonus for the rest of the year. That total was $137,126. I also have up on the right there, I worked with the finance department. They were able to tell me the actual unused wage and benefit total for the month of January, now that we've had the pay period to put in, is $71,471. So that would be, our number of vacancies fluctuated throughout the month of January. That's why, but that's an actual number. So then you go to the second, the other page with the yellow highlights on. I just wanted to kind of put together some sort of visual for you to help you understand, to make the best decision you can regarding this. So on the left-hand column, those are our 14 current vacancies, and under that I have the savings from January of $71,000, or unused, I should say, unused wage and benefit expense. Trying to extrapolate, hopefully we can have a net gain of at least 2 employees hired each month, if everything would go well. That might be a little optimistic, but I wanted to give you some ideas here. So if we did that, then the 6422 is the amount of unused expense from the wage line for each vacancy. Just using that, after the month of February, if we were able to hire 2 more, we would still have $77,064 unused expense there. The next month of March, $64,220. So the total right below that for the first quarter, that would give you a total of unused wages and benefits for those months. That first quarter comes to $212,000. That would be, if you go back to that first page, that would be more than enough. We feel comfortable we'd be able to absorb that into our budget from those wage and benefit lines for option 2, which would be the first 2 quarters of the $1,000 bonus, as well as the 2-hour weekend work bonus. And then you continue on the page with the highlights. Again, if we would be able to maintain hiring at least 2 each month, a net gain of 2 each month, we'll put it that way, you eventually get to under June, the second quarter total would be another $115,596. And then right below that, if you have those 2 projections, again, these are hypotheticals depending on if we're able to fill these positions, that would come to $328,000, which would be, at least in theory, enough then to cover for the whole year from our budget. I do have a few notes on the bottom there. Obviously, the above scenario is an optimistic estimate, assuming we have a net gain of 2 new correctional officers per month. Keep in mind that while we save wages and benefits from every vacancy, we lose more in revenues overall while any pods are closed. With the training time figured in, there will, at some point, there's going to be a period where we theoretically, on the books, have enough staff that it looks like we should be able to open a pod, but we still have to have them actually trained to the level where they can stand a post by themselves. And that's going, so there's going to be a period of time there where we have them, whatever that is, we're 3 short, 4 short, 5 short, whatever it is, but we still can't quite open because we have, a bunch of training. And then the last thing there, maintaining current staff and quickly replacing vacancies is the best way to reduce the potential of a significant revenue shortfall for the year 2022. So, those are just, I wanted to be able to give you some perspective on what we're facing and different options for you, so that you can make the best decision you can regarding this.
I have a question, when combining information from the 2 sheets.
Yep.
Somewhere it's not making sense in my mind. And 4, incentive pay, to get our numbers up. But on the first sheet that you gave us, you said we're losing, I'm gonna round up, 47,000 a month. 46,678, right? And then on the second sheet, in January, we gained monies of 71,471, not gained, didn't use salary line. That tells me we had a net to the plus of around 15,000.
Okay,
or so.
that's a good question. So, going back to the first sheet, this was something I just threw together before the HR committee. At that point, the resolution was written, reference use of ARPA funds. I hadn't had a chance to get the actuals for January. I was taking the February 1st or January 31st, I forget which day I did it, those were our number of vacancies, just extrapolating some numbers, as I said. At that moment in time, that's where we were from a perspective of this is how much we're saving out of this line if everything stayed the same. So when you're looking at this sheet, now that this was developed with the understanding that you may want to consider, in order to move this along quicker, that we could absorb the bonuses and everything from our budget, and some of the guidance we got from the HR committee is, particularly from the wage and benefit line, because we have those vacancies, we have the unused money there, and so that's what this was drawn off of, focusing just on that line within our budget.
And I think to better explain it, I think I know exactly where you're coming from. Net, yes, we have a lot of other expenditures. If you just focus on the wage and benefit line, we have 14 positions that we are currently not spending money on. So those dollars are unexpended, but they're budgeted funds. Yes, there are other expenses that we are incurring right now because of those vacancies, sending people out to other jails, for example, and some of those other things. But if we don't do something to make that swing, those other expenses are going to get much bigger. So hopefully that explains, I think I know where you're coming from, hopefully that explains it. We have to put some money use those wage line, so hopefully we can turn things around, and at the end of the year, those negatives become positives. If that makes sense.
By the time the process runs its course, we should be paying for the bonuses out of your existing budgeted W and B line.
Yes,
Yeah.
that is the plan.
Yeah.
Okay.
And just to clarify too, because it might be a little confusing, the analysis was done with the county administrator and finance director last fall, when we knew we were gonna have to, or we were examining having to shut down HPOD. And because we make so much more on revenue, federal border revenue beds, than we do on certain county inmates, that's why we made the decision to ship out what county inmates we could, which as having on here, the 22 inmates per day, if that was for a full month, cost us $29,946. If we were to bring them all back in and have to lose those 21 federal beds, we'd be losing $55,986. So it's it's a benefit to us to do it that way, especially in the short term as we're trying to get back to full capacity.
Any other questions?
Yes, Scott, so, January, the wages and benefits is, some sort of savings. What, are the revenues with budget then? The revenues are in line with your budget?
No, because we have HPOD closed, we were budgeted to be fully open at 160 contract beds. So it's throughout
And where are you at now?
125.
125,
Yeah, at
What
the
was the
city,
number?
around
about
125.
125 right now, we're averaging.
And it goes up and down each day.
I understand. And how many Dutch County then are? Yeah.
You housed in other locations out there?
No, I mean, you said you had like 20-something, but do you also have Dutch County people in our jail?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And what's that rough number?
Jason, you have that?
It'd be about 60 to 80.
Non-Huber or Huber?
That's including Huber.
So, obviously, we don't have the revenues, and that's why we have wages and benefits, you know, available. This pretense isn't gonna work right here. I mean, I understand we're not spending money because the pot is closed, but we're also not making money. So, you know, we budgeted wages, but we also budgeted revenues, and we're not getting budgeted revenues. We can't fund this program from wages and benefits. Otherwise, we're gonna have a deficit at the end of the year.
We'll have a much larger deficit if we don't do something to turn around and get employees in so that we can reopen HPOD. That's what Scott was trying to get at is yes, there will be some initial upfront cost here to get some employees hired, retained, to make sure that we don't have to close it. But because if we have to close another pod, that deficit at the end of the year is going to be in the millions of dollars, and it isn't going to be nearly what we're looking at right now. That's what we're getting at is we have to put some money into it to make sure that we retain employees, we are able to attract employees, so that hopefully, before the end of the year, we can reopen HPOD and we can start to recoup some of those dollars.
What's the current capacity with HPI closed?
Jason, you have that?
Ballpark.
Working on it.
About 220. And when you, that's our capacity. A jail is supposed to run at about 80% capacity due to classification and being able to move places. That's what's recommended by the National, or American Jail Association. We run higher than that, with a greater than 80% capacity, due to our abilities with direct supervision and indirect supervision pods. We're able to move people around and house them in different areas, so we're able to increase that capacity of our housing units.
What's the capacity of HPI? What would that do?
About 130.
Any other questions? Next item?
Well, actually, what we're looking for here today is a recommendation, or actually some action on which of those options, if any, you would be interested in taking to the HR committee. They would like a recommendation from you before moving forward with a decision by them.
I've been out of the game for a while. I'd like your opinion, or Scott's opinion, or one of your subordinate staff's opinion on what they think would be the best option to attract and retain staff.
Well, the retaining staff is the biggest part here. The best option is the most expensive option, and I'm not necessarily recommending that. I understand that there's a lot going on with the retention bonuses from ARPA. If that even goes forward, there's a lot of questions. You don't want to duplicate one. Maybe this is an area that wouldn't be a bad idea to duplicate because of the position we're in. I asked Scott to put together a couple options for you so that you could consider how we move forward best. I think the weekend bonus or incentive pay is important for the rest of the year because, well, as Dusty was saying, a lot of these people that are leaving for Monday through Friday jobs. They don't want to work nights and weekends. There needs to be some incentive there to keep them here to work on those weekends. So on all three of those options we have there, we have that through the end of the year. What the options are, and of course you can, if you have other ideas, you can certainly consider them. But the options that we have in front of you are, you give them a bonus for the first quarter, a bonus for the first and second quarter, or a bonus for all 4 quarters. And we can certainly review a bonus as we go through the year as well, but the longer out you push those, the more the employees see it as, okay, the county's taking this seriously, and they want to make sure they keep us. In an employee's mind, that's going to speak volumes. I certainly understand if you don't want to go for the full year, and if I was in your shoes, I most likely wouldn't either. I would probably consider 1 or 2 quarters if it was me, and then wait to see what happens with the ad hoc committee. But that's for you to decide on if you think that that's appropriate.
Chairman, if I may offer my opinion, based on, I've been working very heavily with the jail admin throughout all of late summer, fall, and so far this winter with a lot of transitions that we've been going through to move to the 12-hour shifts. Being the one, staffed with the budget, my understanding of that, I think right now we have multiple balls in the air, and we've still got employees that are weighing their options. And the retention portion right now is crucial. The biggest concerns are the wage analysis is not going to come back till probably April, and I would anticipate it'll take a little while to work through before that even goes into place. So from the employee's perspective, they're looking at that and they're not counting that as anything because they may not see it. The ARPA bonuses have been floated out there for multiple months, and from their perspective, nothing has happened. They're again saying this. It's just they're not counting their chickens here. They're like, I don't think it's going to happen, or it may not. So I don't want to get my hopes up. There's a lot of them that are still looking at options out there to leave, and that's why it's so important. I think at this point that we understand if we lose a few more, it's going to be a much more detrimental impact. My personal opinion is option 2, I think, would be very good in that it should get us through to hopefully at least hearing from McGrath and getting an idea on if there is going to be an adjustment to the CO wages, which is going to be very helpful if it happens to the morale of the employees in there. And the retention bonus, the 2 retention bonuses that would come with that would go a long way for those veteran employees to show them that, look, we are investing in you, we want you to stay. So at minimum, that would be my best recommendation, because I believe, like as I said, we can absorb that from our budgeted expenses, and it would potentially help us bridge the gap until some of these other things work through the different processes to see if we can incentivize more employees to come in then to fill these spots. So that would be my recommendation.
Committee, do we want to do a recommendation to adjourn?
Is this ultimately gonna come through on a resolution, or?
As it would be a budgeted expenditure already, or an expenditure that would already be covered in the budget, no. It would be a authorization for the expenditures through the HR committee.
Personally, I'd like to get a statement from Dave Ellinger that this isn't gonna impact the budget at the end of the year. I just, funding this thing through unexpended wages and benefits, I mean, the whole reason you don't have those wages and benefits spent is because you don't have the revenue. You don't have the revenue from that closed pot. We're not gonna meet that 5.5 million, 5.4 million. We're just kicking this thing down the road to the end of the year. We're gonna have a deficit. That's what I see. we need to come up with a source of funds, not wages and benefits. It's either gonna have to come from the general fund or ARPA or something else. This isn't gonna work, this plan, in my opinion. But if Dave Ellinger wants to sign off on that, and give us an opinion as a finance director, I'm fine with that. That's all I want. I mean, if it's not going to finance committee to get their approval on the finances, then that's what I would like to see. I get that we don't have this expended wages and benefits. We don't have the revenue, and you mentioned it right here, right? Keep in mind that, you know, while we say wages and benefits from the vacancy, we lose revenues overall. That is the problem at this point. We need to come up with a source of revenue. And if it's $189,000, then maybe it's gotta come from general fund. But it needs to be funded right from the get-go. Otherwise, you know, we're gonna backfill this thing, you know, come December.
I understand the questions and the concerns, which are very valid regarding the revenue aspect of it, because there's no question that the revenue is one of the keys on adoption. And as the sheriff had indicated, and staff, but you know, there is a source if there is some agreement and a measure of urgency, and that is, I mean, we can certainly have Dave Ellinger take a look at it on Monday, but I think there's so many unknowns as we sit here in February and try to predict what's going to happen 10 months from now. I mean, all of our crystal balls are cloudy at this point. I mean, there's nobody with the clarity who can predict accurately on the revenue end of it between now and December. However, as originally stated, you know, maybe there's a combination here. Maybe some of the ARPA money could be used for that, but then what's the process, as indicated by the sheriff, there would need to be some measure of urgency with that. And that would require county board approval, going through the process with the ad hoc committee, which is going to meet February 23rd, and then with the finance committee and ultimately the county board. But that would, I think, Mr. Gluckenberger, solve some of your questions, at least partially, of how it would be funded. And we're all trying to protect the deficit in the sheriff's office for 2022. And there's a lot of unknowns here, and the chief deputy and the sheriff put together some very good options to consider. And, you know, is in your opinion, as this committee, would the use of some ARPA funds to somewhat backfill this be appropriate and timely? Because if this committee isn't going to support that, is it worth even pursuing with the ad hoc committee? We're trying to bring everybody along with the same level of understanding and to work together on a solution, but we need ideas on that solution and where the support is and where the support isn't. That would be very helpful.
Also, the HR committee conveyed that they were not overly interested in looking at the ARPA funds because of the date we're looking at after the January 21st date. Right. They were not overly interested in looking at ARPA funds to do that. Their recommendation was to do that. We brought these recommendations based on their recommendation of what they would be interested in looking at, and that was pulling it from the wage and benefit line. I think Supervisor Keel made that very clear that that's what she was interested in seeing. So what I'd hate to see happen here is we don't do anything here today or make any recommendations or move something forward quickly, and now it's March or April before we get any action, and I lose 2 or 3 or 4 more correctional officers and have to close another pot. That would be very devastating to the bottom line at the end of the year.
Well, I think we have some thoughts of potentially finance, be able to think numbers back to us, I think. Probably starting with the weekend and PM incentive, hourly bonus, seeing which way, how that something with the quarterly or biannually, later, but starting with, per hour. Weekend PM bonuses, I think would be a good start. And also, something we also have to keep in mind, where is Clearview with the weekend PM stuff as well going forward, because that's gonna be something that'll come up too.
They already have, it's a weekend bonus we're looking at, we already have evenings, but Clearview already has
All right.
weekend bonuses.
That's just a question I had, so.
I don't know, what is their weekend bonus? Just $3?
$2 per hour.
So it should be the same.
It's pretty much just the weekend.
So
Friday,
finance
through
is
Sunday.
able to do something that shows that we covered. And we added extra costs. I think we can start with the weekend PM work bonus per hour and go in stages.
I would keep the PM out of it, because PM we already do, so it's only
Okay,
weekend.
I'm just, you wanted an option, so giving you some.
Yep, yep.
And going in stages with the quarterly bonus, depending on how the finance part of it looks. That's just my opinion.
Sheriff or Administrator, are we looking for a motion right now or just a recommendation from this committee?
Well, I think right now, it's a recommendation to go forward, so we can present a recommendation to both finance. Finance meets on the 14th, human resources meets on the 15th, the ARPA committee meets on the 23rd, but some process to move forward in the next couple of weeks is really what we're looking for. Ideally, the way the resolution is drafted, it's to really help, and that's why it's a draft, but to bring a sense of urgency to it and for the various committees and ultimately the county board, because there is a measure of urgency here of bringing, if not one option, if maybe two options forward, as suggested here today is great, but there needs to be, in my opinion, some movement forward to show that there's options in the pipeline moving forward. That's, so whether you want to do it through a recommendation would be great, definitely, because it's going to take the cooperation of various committees and then ultimately the county board. So it's hopefully everybody working together to try to come up with a solution.
To move the ball along a little bit, I guess I'd like to recommend option 2, which is the 2-month, I'm sorry, 2-quarter bonuses with the weekend differential. And along with that, we could look at that after that is done. And personally, I don't have the expertise to know what fund to take it out of, whether it's ARPA or balance or we come up with money somewhere else. That's some other committee's decision as far as I'm concerned. Our recommendation would just be, this is what we think is best for the running of the jail right now. This is what we'd like to see happen. And how it happens and where it comes from, this committee has no control over.
But your input from that funding of it is important though, and it'll be important as this moves forward to know what your thought process is as far as support. Is ARPA under consideration, or is that definitely off the table?
In my opinion, no.
Pardon?
In my opinion, no.
Okay, that's important to know though.
So, but it would be, like I said before, I agree option 2, looking at, having finance look at that and see what direction we can go.
And if they would come back with ARPA, would the committee support that, if the finance committee supported it?
Well, according to this, we shouldn't have to use our, right?
There still needs to be some further calculations.
Right, well, that's why we would give it back to them, right?
Right, that's fine.
Because nothing's being formally decided here
Right.
today.
And in my opinion, if that's what the finance committee or HR or whoever decided, that is what's best for the county, that's where the money can best be utilized from, I'm 100% behind it. I can't speak for anyone else here, but of course I would.
Okay, that's fair. Then we can do some additional analysis.
Well, I want to find out first if that's our recommendation, that was just my thought, I'm one of four here today.
The only authority, not that we have any authority to spend money, is, general fund, contingency fund. We already tied up ARPA funds in resolution, how they would be spent. So, what concerns me is, do we have the ADP, the average daily population for borders for all of January? I assume by now we even have that number.
It's right around 125.
125. So we're, as I calculated here, that's 93,000 short in revenue. So we get $93,000 less revenue, and we've saved 71,000 in wages and benefits. So we're at a deficit already before we try to fund this thing from this spreadsheet. That's what concerns me. So we have to identify the source of funds, and if that becomes JPP's responsibility, that the only source I know of is general.
I know of no budget that we have that we could draw.
Well, we
from.
don't even have that budget, but I mean, it'd have to be a budget adjustment, and the source of revenue would have to come from the general fund. What's that?
That'd be all that's left to go with.
Well, I mean, it's, the ARPA is kind of caught up in some resolutions that we've already passed, and we're in the middle of a process. So if it's an immediate concern and it has to be addressed, it's gotta come from one source, which is general. I mean, certainly it's not gonna be funded by operations. So that's my concern. It's not gonna be funded by operations. If we're 18,000 deficit just in January, and that's just one category, wages and benefits, right? So, I think quite honestly, I mean, I'm not sitting here qualified to say where the source of the fund should be, okay? Because the only thing I can properly identify would be general fund. I know it's there, okay? The rest of the stuff, I just don't know where I would come up with it. So,
Options are probably slim options.
well, I mean, if we send this someplace, wherever this thing is gonna go, finance or HR or whoever, there's gotta be a source of funds. I understand we have the need, but now we gotta figure out where the funds are gonna come from. Maybe, the whole budget's gotta be looked at, to identify sources of funds.
Yes.
Do we have any money being returned to the budget from last year's term? We could
We
use
don't have that yet, I don't know that it's closed yet, so that's a good question for Dave.
I'm just wondering about that, and I know it's supposed to be for the same purpose, but maybe this time something could be done if there was money being returned. Just an idea.
Do you have any kind of an estimate on that yet or not?
About all I can say is at this point, it looks like we will be in the black, that we will, because of the being above our order numbers for a good portion of the first part of the year, that we were able to absorb the shortage at the end of the year. Unfortunately, we don't have that starting out in January, so, but it looks like we will have some, or some left over.
And usually that follows, or early March, and then usually goes most of the prior year. March.
But I would also reiterate that's exactly why the longer we delay action, especially if it results in more employees leaving, it's just going to be a bigger problem as it goes down the road.
And again, I think I will bring up that I recommend option 2. I understand there's a revenue problem, and I guess if we see a problem and we think it has to be corrected and there has to be a plan to correct it, it's not this committee's job to find the money. We're recommending do option 2. If other committees or the board decides this is what we want to do, then one of those entities has to say, here's an option to get the money from. But I can tell you, I can't write a check for that much and cover it. So someone else is gonna have to come up with the money. And I think right now, we need a recommendation for an option, and I 504.2, is there any other recommendations?
But what does it mean, going for option two? What specifically does that mean?
The weekend differential, and we'll pay quarter one and quarter two, and then review it at that time. Tell me if I'm wrong.
Who are we affecting? What peoples? This is just
That's a good question.
correction officers, corporals, sergeants? What are we dealing, what is option two?
That's a good question. That is the corrections staff, which include the corrections officers, the programs officers, correction corporals, and the correctional sergeants.
And what does that mean, quarterly bonus?
It would be $1,000 in April, as long as they have worked January, February, and March, the entire time. It would be a second quarter bonus in July, as long as they worked in April, May, and June. That's a great question.
And there's $2 per hour weekend work bonus,
That would start at 6 PM on Friday night and end at 6 AM on Monday morning.
and what people, just hourly people?
Same group of people. They're all over them.
And that's not an uncommon practice in any correctional setting to have weekend differential and night differential.
And currently, we have a night differential already in place of 75 cents per hour for the 6 PM to 6 AM shift. The second shift from 10 AM to 10 PM, get 50 cents per hour. Or incentive.
So people working the weekend during those 9 hours would get both, correct?
Correct.
So how does this affect new hires?
They would receive the same weekend incentives and bonuses if they are here during that time.
Okay. And then, but they would also be entitled to the $6,000 hiring bonus?
Correct. Which is due to be reviewed in April.
Are there any other recommendations that we want to look at? If not, what is the committee's, I'll go vote on option two.
What are we voting on? I mean, are we gonna ask?
Option two,
Finance to look at this?
to recommend option two to the HR committee.
To do what?
I don't know what they're going to do, they'll probably take our recommendation and see if it can move forward. They're looking for a recommendation from this entity as to what we think is the best solution to help solve the problem.
Now, in addition, that any recommendation should also go to the finance committee, because that's for the revenue analysis and expense analysis. So it's a combination of both committees reviewing your recommendation, this committee's recommendation.
Okay, my understanding, I thought it was going to HR first and then we're going to finance.
Well,
That's fine.
the finance committee meets the day before human resources.
I think it just has to go to finance. I mean, you gotta find a source of funds, Jim.
I agree.
And, you know, unfortunately, from a timing standpoint, everything I hear, you know, ARPA funds aren't, unless we do something different with the resolutions we've already passed, that's not a source of revenue. So, if it's general fund, then so be it. Identify the crisis, if that's what it is, and then we'd have to do some sort of measuring and see if it's actually fixing the problem. I mean, if we're gonna do 2 quarters, then we should sit down and evaluate whether or not it's working. I mean, it doesn't appear as though the $6,000 hiring bonus is working, right? Because, you know, by testimony, we haven't had one candidate in 2 weeks.
But we've had a number of candidates since October when this has been implemented, and a number of them have said, yes, we came here because of that, so yes, it is working.
Yeah, we only had one successful hire prior to the $6,000 bonus in how many months? Almost 6 months.
May to December.
And then after the bonus was entered, we've now successfully hired 9. So that I would say that has significantly helped.
But we haven't had one candidate, though, I mean, not in one application. appears though that incentive is healthy right now. But maybe the combination of the two would help, right? $6,000 bonus and $1,000 bonus after 3 months.
And that's the challenge, that what is the proper incentive? We don't know. I mean, it's putting forth ideas and to evaluate them once they're implemented, but we're open to other suggestions as well as to ideas of possible solutions. We have similar issues in other operating areas of the county, but right now, this area, and we know we have challenges at Clerk, and we may have some challenges at Public Health, which will be communicated next week, but based on, but, so we're looking for some solution, and, but we don't know what the impact will be until something's implemented and we see the results. There aren't any guarantees on this. It's just, I don't think anybody can make any guarantees, but it's important to be moving initiatives forward and then evaluate them and also entertain other ideas. It takes collectively everybody working together to come up with some ideas and solutions. And we will certainly look at the revenue analysis starting Monday and have some analysis prior to so that can be presented to the Finance Committee on the 14th.
Right now, there's a recommendation out for option 2 to go to other committees as a starting point to move forward. I would like to know from this committee who agrees that after 2 months, we're going to be able to review this rather than a whole year, just 1 month, which won't give a good picture, in my opinion. Who's in favor of option 2? Aye.
That'd be fine with it, as long as we're gonna evaluate not 2 months, but in 5 months from now.
Well, it'll be 2 and 5 too, because it ends in 2 months, we'll have to see what's going on. We can't do it for 2 months and then say, let's wait 3 and evaluate it.
We'll be a month and a half into it before we dig in. And by the time it gets through the other committees and stuff, we'll be mid-April, or excuse me, mid-February.
Well, hopefully so. I'm hoping it's gonna move a lot faster.
If I could just suggest, we already have a recruitment and retention standing, the HR and executive committee meetings. If we just were to, because this is gonna be an issue for corrections, recruitment, and retention, maybe we have a standing issue, which is something we talk about here every month here at least through the end of the year, and then we keep everybody apprised of what's going on this.
Well, I think from excuse me one second.
Sure.
I think from what just happened here, we are recommending option 2 to move this forward. We can debate it all we want right here. There isn't a person, I don't think, that's sitting in this room, that doesn't agree that we have to have a revenue fund. We can't say we're gonna spend money and not have the money to spend. We have to find a source for it, and that's the question. And then we have to make sure we evaluate it to ensure we're getting the effect that we want for the cost. So that's just my analysis. I preach it again, I'll try to be quiet. Any other comments and concerns?
The only thing I would like to have come back then from Dale or Scott is, plan for the rest of the department, because you already mentioned compression issues, you mentioned last Tuesday issues at communications. This is gonna create other problems countywide. So I think I would need to know what your plan is, what a plan would be like this for the rest of your department.
And I can speak to communications. Communications is another very fragile area right now. We're full staffed. I've got very good staff, and I don't anticipate any of them leaving. However, if I would, all of a sudden, because of wages, and we're in the midst of a wage study with McGrath. They just started that. I don't know that I can come back with any plan for you next month. I think it would be prudent to wait until that is done, until they come back with recommendations to the HR committee. I think that would be the right time to address that. Those aren't as urgent as this particular one is. present you with something when the facts are gonna change here shortly, if that makes sense. If I'm wrong and you want me to bring you something, I can, but I don't wanna bring something and then the facts change 2 months later.
Well, you're the best to put your pulse of, your thumb on the pulse of this whole thing, right? I can't.
There are
Right?
communications.
But I know, and you've already mentioned, that communication's gonna be a problem.
There's a potential there, and I think if we wait for the wages to be done there and then address that, I think it would be great if we could find a funding source to give them this weekend bonus as well, or weekend and retention bonus as well. I think as Scott said, there's a lot of balls in the air right now with all of these different things, the resolution, the wage, the communications is just as important as corrections and fragile as corrections. However, we're in an emergency situation with corrections. If there would be a way to implement something with correction or communications for these same things, I'd be all for that, and it would be very helpful, because communications around the state and around our area have been struggling as our corrections are. They are 4, 5, 6 short in the other communications centers around us, and it's a real struggle. We're not there yet, but I hate to get there, and now we have the same problem. So if that's something you want to consider, even as part of this, as part of your recommendation, if you want to amend your recommendation, I'm all for that. But I do think we want to make sure that we have all the facts before we move forward when it's not an emergency situation like we have in corrections, if that makes sense.
I think I heard someone mention to make this like we did with contract updates, a monthly permanent agenda item to keep us informed of what's going on with it. And it doesn't have, with staff morale because of this, how it affects your whole department. So if that can be somehow relayed to become a permanent agenda item for future months, because I'm not going to be here, so we've got to get it on the agenda. Next item.
I don't know if it's on a line, I don't have the agenda ahead of me, but everyone else reported on carryovers. You should have in your packet the two that for the sheriff's office. They're both revolving accounts, so to speak, year over year to year. One is the law enforcement fund and the other is the K-9 fund. Both are funds that our donations come into that are specific for those uses. Therefore, every year we do those as carryovers. I don't have any beyond that though.
Also, we do have one more, the crime prevention fund, which should also have been in there. That's another statutory one that those funds carried over. We didn't have any activity this last year. A lot of it's COVID related and also trying to build that dollar amount up a little bit so we can actually present some really beneficial crime prevention fund grants here in the future. We'll be having a meeting here soon, but that carryover request is there as well that we have to look for.
And I know I ask this question every year because I can't remember, what action do we have to take on this request? Or is it just you inform us and that's all that needs to be done?
I believe they just asked that we inform our committees of any carryover requests before they go.
Okay, maybe, well, I don't know the word. Did American Rescue Plan Act, is that covered?
That's already been covered.
Okay.
And then we have discuss, review, consider the ordinance to amend chapter 901 and 30.04 battery and no licensed bartender on premises. We have a couple of ordinances there that we've identified as they would be very beneficial to have in our tool belt. I'll cover the battery ordinance first. Battery is a state crime and is generally used when we have somebody who has inflicted some kind of pain on somebody else. However, there are some occasions where there may be a very minor injury or frequently throughout my career, we've had bar fights. And yeah, somebody got popped in the face and they got a bloody limb. But the DA's office may not prosecute that. There still needs to be some accountability there. They may not prosecute it for a number of reasons, but they will tell us that a ordinance citation may be appropriate. We don't have the battery statute to fall back on. right now to issue that ordinance citation for those lesser offenses, or where somebody, they need some accountability, but they don't need to go to jail that day. And ordinances can be very effective enforcement. Not everybody always needs to go to jail, is what we're getting at. Anybody who's seriously injured, obviously, they're going to be held accountable for criminal statute, but there are occasions where a battery statute or ordinance is prudent for us as an enforcement mechanism. The other one is no licensed bartender on premises. And I'll tell you that has been, it's not a huge issue, but it is one that we have regularly, where we have bars that are open and there's no bartender there. And under state law, they have to either have the owner of the premises or a licensed bartender. And they're supposed to go through the bartender responsibility courses, and there are requirements there. And we do come into it regularly that we have no bartender. And the only recourse that we have there, absent another violation, is we're closing down the bar. That's it. There is no teeth to, you have to make sure you have a bartender here. And I've analyzed this with Corp Counsel, and we believe this would apply to both that person who is there acting as a bartender, and or mostly it would be the bar itself that would be held accountable. So it could apply to both. And we're asking that you take action to add these to the Code of Ordinances for Dodge County so that we can utilize them.
I'll make a motion. There's a motion and a second to approve this, because the ordinance number with the ordinance, the proposal resolution. Any further discussion?
That's from ordinance or resolution?
It's ordinance.
Ordinance, okay.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Or- Yes. Sheriff, anything else while this is going around being signed?
Absolutely. Between the DA and I talking, you better heard it on board of this.
You said it, not me.
You talk longer.
Next meeting will be March 4th, 8 o'clock, right here. Look for a motion.